Hello bookish people, welcome back to my channel. My name is Megan. In today's video we are going to be reading my first ever dark romance book because my For You page will not stop with haunting Adeline Zade Meadows content. Like, that's all I see on my For You page. So of course I got it, I downloaded it on my Kindle, and now we are going to read it. I'm excited. I've never read a dark romance before. I have no idea what to expect going into it. Like, I feel like I should be scared, but also I'm like, it's a romance, like how, you know, like how crazy can it get? But I'm excited. I didn't even change positions. I just started reading. I haven't even gotten to the content of the book yet. Now I'm scared. Now I am scared. The author's note, and then it ends with your mental health matters. What am I about to get myself into? Okay, so this video is just gonna be me live reacting to this book, and we're only on page 27, and like, girl, okay, so there has been 22,000 people that have highlighted this quote. It says, "All I want to do is break her, shatter her into pieces, and then arrange those pieces to fit against my own. I don't care if they don't fit. I'll fucking make them." Are you guys okay? Like, okay, on its own, yes, that quote's not so bad, but you go down a few lines, and he goes, "Because I'm obsessed, I'm addicted, and I will gladly cross every single line if it means making this girl mine. If it means forcing her to be mine." I don't know that dark romance is my genre, but then another part of me is like, ooh, okay, I see you. I can see how I will like this book as it goes on. But right now, I am very conflicted on my feelings. And what I mean by conflicted is 99% of me is like walking red flag, and then the other 1% of me is like, ooh, okay, I want to see how this goes. Okay, so I've just been lounging around, reading all day. I am at page 160, which is 30% into the book. It's definitely kind of a slow burn between these two, and it's starting to pick up now. But this book doesn't really like make much sense to me. Like, specifically Zade doesn't make much sense to me because I feel like his character kind of contradicts himself, because on one hand he is like this vigilante, right? And like, he has some sort of a moral compass. Like, it's a fucked up moral compass, but he has some sort of moral compass. He sees like the trafficking, the abuse that's going on, and he identifies that as bad, and he tries to go after the people who are perpetuating that and save the victims. So he obviously feels some empathy for the victims, and he wants to get back at the bad people in that situation. But then on the other side, when it comes to Addie, he is literally stalking her and abusing her. Not that they really had too much interactions to be like, oh, like, you know, he's not like physically abusing her at this point. I mean, I don't know what comes on later in the book, but like to the point where he's like obviously scaring her and like making her feel like she's in danger and stalking her and manipulating her, like, oh, if you sleep with this guy, like, I will cut off his hands, and like threatening her. So it's just like, I don't understand how those two people exist at the same time. Like, obviously he has a fucked up moral compass, so like it makes sense why he treats her the way he does, but it doesn't make sense that you have so much empathy for these victims and you specifically identify women and children that you like have empathy for, but then this woman over here, you're literally stalking her. Like, I don't know, it just seems like a contradiction to me. Also too, the parallel between Gigi, her great-grandmother, and what is happening with her right now, I think is really interesting, and obviously we're going to explore that connection like as we go on. So yeah, overall I would say like I'm definitely invested in the story. Like, I can't say I'm sold on it or anything. It's like when you're reading from Zade's POV, I like him. I like his POV. I like reading his inner monologue, and again, like, because he is trying to help these human trafficking victims, right? But then when you're reading from Addie's POV, I don't like him because it's like, I get anxiety reading her chapters because like the thought of me being in her shoes in this situation happening is frightening, right? It's so frightening. Like, oh, I stare out my window and there's this like scary man staring back at me, and he's stalking me, and he's breaking into my house, and I don't know how he's doing it. Like, the amount of like mental torture that would put me through, you know? So I don't really know how to feel yet. I'm still along for the ride. We're 30% in. I would say definitely the things between Addie and Zade are very slow burn because they haven't really interacted too much up until this point. We're on page 160. So like, I guess like some aspects of it I get like slightly bored. I mean, there's like a lot to keep you interested, but I don't know. It's like over 500 pages, and I'm just getting a little bit bored, but also interested. I don't know how to say it properly. Like, it's not that I'm bored, but also like, let's pick up the pace. I guess that's a good way to say it. Okay, it is the next day. I am reading this book, and our main character's best friend dies. She's like, oh, like, are we going to the haunted house this year? And she's like, oh my god, of course we're going to the haunted house. If I had a stalker, the last thing I would want to do is go into a haunted house. Like, I don't know, does that just, like, not foreshadow some things that are gonna come? And then she says in here, she literally says, I just get off on being scared. So I feel like that's all I needed to know for the rest of this book to make sense. Like, it makes sense she's gonna fall in love with her stalker. Like, it's all coming together. It's all making sense to me. He literally, right now, has a knife to her throat and goes, are you gonna cry, Addie? And, like, smiles. I'm just so confused. Like, how is this the same man that saves human trafficking victims and, like, feels bad, right? He's like, oh my god, like, look at the fear in their eyes. I want to kill every man that did this to these victims. Yet he is, like, doing... not like trafficking them, but he's like provoking a similar fear in Addie and getting off on it. I don't understand. Does he like kill the human trafficking people because he's like, I have to kill evil type, like a projection type of thing, like I'm evil on the inside so I must eradicate evil, like, you know, projection thing? Because like I'm not understanding how this is the same guy. It's not making sense to me. I just read the most messed up scene in my entire life. He literally essays her, R-words her, assaults her, and I just, like, don't understand how, like, this is the man that is being so hyped up on TikTok. Like, what happened? Storm's yawning. He's like, excuse me. What happens that this guy gets redeemed? Like, what happens in this book where this is a redeemable man, where we're all rating this book 5 stars and praising him on TikTok? Like, where is it? I just, like, don't understand. Like, I don't think anybody can make up for that. I'm just very confused right now. So we're just going to keep reading. I'm 191 pages into this book. How, like... I'm speechless. Okay, so I have been reading this book. Right now I'm on chapter 32, which is page 409. And honestly, like, I feel like I have been taking this book too seriously, maybe. So I was watching Larry Reed's, like, reading vlog of reading both books. And she's literally laughing during the vlog, like, at the things Zayd says. And I'm like, am I just taking this book too seriously? Am I just being negative because I'm taking this too seriously and I shouldn't be taking this book seriously? But then again, it's like so hard for me to not take the book seriously when there's a non-con scene in it. Like, I just can't get past that. But I'm after obviously the 50% mark. Right now I'm 76% in, and I would say the beginning of the book was a little slower to get into. One, because I was just seriously disturbed by the content and I was like, how does anybody like Zayd? But then after the 50% mark, when him and Addie start having like more interactions, and then it's still a serious tone to the book, obviously, because we're dealing with hard topics, but there is like a lot of banter, so it makes it like a little bit more lighter. Like, you take the like serious topics, but now we have a lightness to it because they have kind of like their witty banter back and forth with each other. So I am liking it more after the 50% mark, but like I still don't understand how Zayd could be redeemable. Also too, like, obviously the book is problematic, right? And I don't think that anyone could say like, oh no, it's not problematic. They just are there for the good time, right? And they're there for the spice. So like, I'm not saying like the people promoting this book are like, oh no, it's perfect and not problematic. I think everyone can admit there is problematic things in this book. And one of them being, now that we're at the point where we're in the fun house, right? We had that whole situation, and he is interrogating one of the guys who were like talking about kidnapping Addie. And he was like, why, like, is she on the society's radar? And he's like, well, she's been on the society's radar like this whole time. Like, before so when I saw her in the cafe, when I took her picture, she was already marked. That's why I recognized her. That's why I wanted to take a picture of her. And then Zayd says like, oh shoot, this girl was destined for human trafficking before I even met her. She just happened to be the girl I fell in love with. Okay, like that right there, right? It's like, that's the reason why this story works, because like, oh my god, like, he's really just saving her. And it's like, okay, like the guy who's like stalking her, who is like controlling her and R-worded her, oh my god, but he's like actually the hero because like she was destined for human trafficking. Like, I can't, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, roll your eyes. Like, it's just like, oh, like, it just happens to be this way, so therefore every action that he's taken against her is forgivable. You know, so I think that's just like very problematic. But again, maybe I'm just taking this book too seriously and it's not meant to be taken seriously. I finally finished Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. Let's talk about it. I am so conflicted on this book, and I really do not know how to feel about this book, and no book has made me question myself more than this book. So let's talk about it. This is just going to be chaotic. It's just going to be my thoughts and opinions on the book. Let's talk about the entertainment value of the book. I would rate that about a 4 star. I was pretty entertained during this book. The first 50% is definitely more of a slow burn, and the first 50% of this book definitely made me anxious. I read a lot of mystery thriller, a few horror books, and no book has made me anxious like this book. The only comparable one would be Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, and kind of similar themes in that book is what made me anxious in this book. And it's like you never know what's behind the door, or who's behind the door, or who's watching you, stuff like that. That's the type of stuff that makes me anxious. And so I definitely got anxious during the first 50% of this book, but I think that's like a good thing, right? It's like, okay, the author was really able to make me feel things in the first 50% of this book. You know, it's almost like watching a horror movie. And then I would say the last 50% of the book, the second half of the book, that's where we start to see their banter with each other and how they interact with each other. And obviously there's lots of spice. And I actually really enjoyed the last 50% of the book. You know, I was really entertained by it. I was intrigued by the storyline. This is where I get conflicted in the story. And this is where I just like keep having to refilm this clip because I guess I'm not articulating myself in the way that I want to. But this book is just so problematic. Like, yes, I was entertained, but it was also so beyond problematic that I just feel like I could never like recommend this book. Usually when I read a book, I'm like, oh my god, I want it on my shelves. It's like a trophy. Like, look what I read. This book, I do not want it anywhere near my shelves. I don't want people to see this on my bookshelves. My biggest issue with this book is the non-con scene with the gun, and it's too much. And the author does mention this scene in the author's note, like as a trigger warning before you even get into the story. And that's where I guess also part of me is conflicted, because is it fair to criticize that when it is like in bold letters in the author's note before you even start the story? But at the same time, I guess there is criticism to be had. Even though she says, yes, this does happen, she doesn't say that she romanticizes it. She just says it happens. She doesn't talk about how she handles the situation. And I definitely do agree with the 1-star reviews of Haunting Adeline that this book definitely romanticizes like abuse, stalking, and that non-con scene. It definitely romanticizes all those things. And to me, that scene just kind of made Zaid irredeemable as a character, because it's like, how can you come back from that? And just how different Zaid is in his like two different lives. Zaid is Z versus Zaid in person, and it just like doesn't really make sense to me. Those two people don't go together. They're like such a contradiction of each other. I guess that's where my main conflict comes from, because I understand the 4- and 5-star girlies of this book who are like, oh, like I don't condone any of the characters' actions. I'm just here for the entertainment, and I was thoroughly entertained. And then I understand the 1-star girlies who are like, no, this book definitely romanticizes all these bad things. And I agree with that criticism as well. Like, I totally agree. This book really does romanticize like abuse and stalking and all these different things. But again, is that part of the dark romance subgenre that I was just unaware of, because I've never read a dark romance before. I guess I was just like confused why these people, I guess I was just confused, like, why is my whole For You page like hyping up Zaid Meadows? Like, why? Like, he's not that great of a book boyfriend. I don't understand why I'm scrolling through TikTok and I see people with sweatshirts that literally say Z Meadows on them, because I have seen people wearing Haunting Adeline sweatshirts. Like, I guess I just don't understand it. Also, Zaid as a character doesn't really have much personality in this book. Like, what is his personality? That he's this vigilante and then he's a stalker? Like, where do we see the other parts of him? And especially because like his backstory just is like non-existent. It's like, oh no, I was raised by a really nice mom and dad and I had a pretty good life. I just fell into the life of vigilante because there's just something messed up inside me. Like, no, like anytime you see a show like Dexter, for example, who is like a vigilante serial killer, and you see like all these other shows with these vigilantes, they always have a backstory. And the reason why they have a backstory is because something has to happen in their past that leads them to this point in their life. Like, no one just wakes up and wants to do these things unless you're saying you're literally like a psychopath. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Also, we don't really get too much backstory on Addie as well. Like, okay, we understand like she gets off on fear, but like, is that something she was born with? Why does she feel that way? Is there something that happened to her in her past that has made her to be this way? We're really with the characters in the present, and we don't really understand them as people because we know nothing really about their past. Also, this book just has way too many like coincidences that just like aren't really realistic to the story. Like, first of all, the fact that her great grandmother Gigi lived in that house and fell in love with her stalker, and then, oh my god, Addie lives in that house and she fell in love with her stalker. Like, is it really that common of an event to happen to two family members within like one generation apart? Also too, I would say that storyline with the murder mystery, like although it's a dark romance book, like I'm not expecting like twists and turns and shocks with the murder mystery. That it was very predictable. Like, obviously you knew it was going to be Frank. It's like, okay, like, well, obviously it's not going to be the stalker because that's too obvious. It's not going to be her husband. That's also too obvious. I guess where you could say it was a little shocking is that her grandmother helped cover up her great grandmother's death, you know, so like, you know, Addie's grandmother helped cover up the, you know, you get what I'm saying. So yeah, I would say Frank being the person Also very predictable, and like Frank being related to Mark, and Mark is part of the society. Like, it's just like all interconnects like too conveniently. The biggest plot convenience in this book that I personally did not like is that Addie was a target of the society all along. He's stalking her, but like she's a target for the society, so like all of that's forgiven because now he's in her life and he can protect her. They didn't know she was a target going into stalking her. It just happened to be a coincidence that excuses all his behavior. So yeah, I guess that's my issue with the book. I don't have a problem with her getting kidnapped at the end of the book. You know, I think that is a natural progression of their story, but to make the reason why she got kidnapped just like, oh, it's the evil people's fault, instead of like, no, Zaid put her in this position because of what he does for a living and the fact that he's involved Addie in his life, that would have been made for a much more compelling story, because it really just like washes Zaid's hands of anything that happens or anything he's done or anything that happens to Addie, because it was just meant to happen to her. I mean, like I said, entertained by the book, but also I can find like a laundry list of criticisms for this book, and I believe valid criticisms for this book. So that is what I will say about Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. And God only knows what's gonna happen in the next one. Okay, I definitely look crazy, but don't judge me. It's like 10 p.m. at night. But I am reading Hunting Adeline. I'm on page 111 right now. So this book is incredibly dark, and incredibly, like, so much darker than the first book, because in the first book, right, you're really building on Addie and Zaid's relationship, so even the non-con stuff, like, is like in that gray area. Even though I think the first scene is totally not in that gray area, never mind. But like, this stuff here is like super dark and messed up, and some Law and Order SVU type of things going on. Also too, I would like to say Rio, I am very skeptical of him as a character, because I feel like he has to be like undercover somehow. I mean, like, yes, he like comes off as a bad guy, but he comes off as like an undercover bad guy, if that makes sense. Because if you look at all the actions he takes against Addie, he never really lays hands on her. I did look up semi-spoilers for this book, but like, I wouldn't call them spoilers. They're just like things I need to not DNF the book, because like, I am so impatient when it comes to a slow burn. So what I looked up is what chapter Zaid finds Addie. Like, I don't need to know how he finds her or what goes down. I don't want to read the scene like without getting to it first, but I just need to know when it happens. So like, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read up till that chapter tonight, hopefully. Like, I just need to know when it happens, so I'm not like getting bored and like, oh my god, is this ever gonna come? You know, I don't know if other people are like that, but I will specifically look up when things happen. Hey, I'm not gonna lie, Zaid is actually kind of funny. So right now he's meeting with the brothers, and he's basically like trying to get them to, you know, help them find Addie. And he's like, what's in it for you? He's like, I'll give you a deal. And he goes, what makes you think we'd have any use for you? He questions dryly. And then this is Zaid's inner monologue. He goes, my ego, it hurts. I don't know why, it just made me laugh. I'm liking the Zaid chapters obviously a lot more than the Addie chapters, because Addie's chapters are just so dark and messed up, but like Zaid's chapters are more like investigative. It's like a nice breath of fresh air after being in like such a dark place. So yeah, I'm just hoping to stay in his POV for a lot longer, because my mental well-being does not want to go back to Addie's POV. The night is progressing right now. We have a Lofi girl and my little love bugs sleeping there, and oh my god. So Zaid rescued Addie. We love it. We'd love to see it. It was a beautiful scene. I almost cried. I didn't cry, but like, I could feel the cries coming. It was a beautiful moment. But now we're into like a slow burn romance. Like, I get it, Addie's healing from her trauma, but it's like, oh my god, we took so long to get here. They're finally reunited, but their reunitedness is gonna be a slow burn. I'm just waiting. Okay, it is the next day, and I am on chapter 28 of this book, and I don't know, like, let's just talk about how I feel about this book. So there's a bit of a lull in the book right now. So he rescued Addie, it was great, but now she's dealing with all her trauma, which I personally don't love when characters are dealing with trauma. Like, I just like I find it boring. Like, I like characters to be their normal selves, and like, I get it, like, it's super realistic, right? Like, her having like PTSD and her not wanting Zaid to touch her, like, because of everything she went through in the trauma, and like, I get it. I totally understand, and I think it's realistic, but this is a dark romance. It's a book. It's fiction. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to move on to the part where Zaid gets the bad guys and Addie and Zaid are back to their normal self. I do understand why people hype Zaid up so much, specifically in this book. Like, I get it, like, because he shows such a sweet side to her in this book that you don't really see in the first book. So I get the Zaid hype just based on this book. I get the Zaid hype, because in the first book I was like, wait, why is he like top tier book boyfriend? Like, I'm not understanding. Now, like, I'm starting to get it. Okay, so I officially have 100 pages left of Hunting Adeline, and I just want to say, okay, I get it. The girlies were right. Zaid's hot. I get it. I get it now. I would say about this series, I mean, this is a spoiler reading vlog, so anybody watching this has already read the series, but what I would say to the people who haven't read it yet, if you're going to read the series, really commit to reading both books, because I don't think you're really going to love Zaid unless you read the second book. Okay, so I'm on page 454, and Addie and Zaid are fighting again. Oh my god, like, I'm over it. I'm over it. Can we get to the happily ever after? Let's hurry it up. Let's get there. Like, this book is like, yes, it's great when they come together, but they just spend too much time apart, you know? Like, too much time in conflict with each other. Okay, so right now I'm on 489, and did this book really need to be 500 pages long? Because I'm skimming. I'm bored. Let's go. Like, let's get it over with. I know I only have like 20 pages left, but like, come on. Like, I don't know if it's because I've been reading too long, but also it's like, okay, you know that feeling when you've been reading for like too long and you kind of want to stop, but then you like only have like 50 pages left or like 20 pages left. Like right now I have 20 pages left. Like, I'm not gonna stop until I finish those 20 pages. But like, do I want to read those 20 pages? No. I finished Hunting Adeline by H.G. Carlton. Let's talk about it. I am struggling to get through this wrap-up, similar to how I was struggling to get in the wrap-up for the first book, and that's because, again, I enjoyed the book. Entertainment value, I would rate it at a 4-star. The whole series I would rate as a 4-star for entertainment value, and then the laundry list of problems. I could list you 100 problematic things that happened in Hunting Adeline by H.G. Carlton. I don't have too much to say about the first half of the book. Obviously, what Addie went through was absolutely terrible. It was so hard to read those scenes. It was a lot. This is one of those books, like, I'm happy it is a book, and because I would never be able to watch the movie. I could not stomach at visually seeing these things that happen, because the things that were happening to Addie were just so heartbreaking, so terrible. And the reason I don't have too much to say about it is because I don't, and my criticism from the first book is obviously that the author was romanticizing abuse and all these things, and then we go through a situation where Addie is put into trafficking. She is going through abuse, and obviously there's no romanticization of it at all. Like, it's just terrible, and your heart is just breaking for Addie the whole time. I guess one criticism I would have for the beginning of the book is, one, it was very long. Like, it is like the first 50% of the book that Addie is in trafficking, so the first 50% of the book, like, is not a romance at all. And I know the author does warn you at the beginning, like, oh, if you're looking for a quick reunion, like, this isn't the book for you. But like, do we need to take 50% of the book to get her back? Now let's start off from the point where Zaid rescues Addie, and now we're actually getting into the romance of the book, because it's just like a lot to ask someone to go through like 225 pages of a romance and there be not a lot of romance happening in the book, right? So now let's get into when Zaid rescues Addie. That scene in particular, I don't know, I felt like we were building so much, right? Because we had over 200 pages of them trying to get back to each other, and they finally reunite, and I felt like it was just very like rushed, right? Like, they hug and then the chapter's over, and then we go straight into Addie dealing with her trauma, and I feel like we didn't really get like this beautiful scene with them reuniting. Like, yeah, she hugged him and wrapped her legs around him, she's like, I love you, like, but we didn't really get too much of the after effects of that and what it was like when they got home. Like, they weren't professing their love for each other, like, you know what I mean? I just felt like that part, there was such a big build up to it, and then it just kind of was rushed and over really quickly, and it was a little satisfying, but not like complete satisfaction from that moment. After they are reunited, after Addie is home, I start to see why people hype Zaid up so much and why he's like this amazing book boyfriend. He's so sweet to Addie when she comes back. He just wants to help her. He's just like, I will take things as slow as possible. I am here for you. I just want to be there for you, right? Like, I just want to help you. So I get why people like him in that instance, but I would honestly say that any guy, if you have gone through this situation, any guy should be treating you this way. Like, no, like, oh my god, he's amazing because he doesn't want to pressure her into having sex with him. Like, like, any guy should be acting that way. Like, what the heck? Any guy should help you like deal with your trauma and your emotions. If you guys were together, then this happens to you, then you guys are like reunited. Like, any guy should be treating you well after you come back. Like, it's just like, it's just decency, it's just like common decency for how someone should treat you after you come back from that type of situation. But it's like, oh my god, like, he's just so amazing. Like, I can't believe he's treating her so well. I mean, there's like cute things in here, I guess, like when he smokes, you know, he picks up his cigarette butts because Addie doesn't like him to litter. When they go get ice cream, she's like, I want mint chocolate chip, and he's like, oh, you want mint chocolate chip? I don't like that. But then he ends up getting it anyway. She's like, I thought you didn't like it, and he's like, oh, but I like you and you like it, so I'm gonna eat it. Which, is that romantic or is that just weird? Like, no, just get the flavor you want. Like, I don't care what ice cream flavor you get. I'm such a hater. Like, I'm sorry to the people who love this book, but like, there's just so many. I'm not saying I wasn't entertained, but like I could go on and criticize and criticize and criticize. And this book, I feel like, is like so classic, like 2014 emo Tumblr people. All the knife play in this book, like literally was just like, is this like 2014 emo Tumblr era over here? Like, what is going on? Another thing about this book, which I literally just thought about, is that Addie and Zaid haven't really been together that long before she gets kidnapped, right? So like Zaid put her through some like terrible things, the non-concy with the gun. And so it's almost like that she kind of had Stockholm syndrome with Zaid, right? It's like, okay, he literally says he'll never let me go, I can never escape him, so I just kind of resign myself to being with him because I am broken down, I feel powerless, right? And then we move into her getting kidnapped, and I feel like she was kidnapped for a good amount of time. It was like 2-3 months that she was kidnapped, and it's almost like she was going through something so much more traumatic than Zaid ever put her through, so she almost like romanticizes him in her head, and she's like, oh, well, Zaid's coming for me, he's my everything, right? Like, he's gonna save me from this. And it's kind of like what she went through was so much worse. It's like, I'd rather be at the lesser of two evils, you know? Like, if I'm gonna either have to be rescued by Zaid and stuck with him for the rest of my life, or stay in trafficking for the rest of my life, like, I'd rather be with Zaid, right? It's like the lesser of two evils, and almost her going through the kidnapping, I think, solidified her feelings for him even more, because she had all this time going through traumatic events that just made her romanticize Zaid in her head. And then she gets back together with him, right? And then they're going through that push and pull again. But yeah, overall, my criticism would be, like, Addie was kidnapped for way too long. We spent too much time on that. Their reuniting moment was just a little bit lackluster. I was hoping for more. And then when we get back to it, she's dealing with her trauma, so that we don't really get like a beautiful relationship moment in that. Like, so it's just kind of like we're back to a slow burn again, because she's back and she's dealing with her trauma. She has to heal from her trauma. Of course, she'll be able to open up to him again, which is totally realistic, but then it just turns it into another slow burn. This book almost would have been better as a trilogy and like make it shorter, right? And like the first book is like the stalking and the relationship. The second book is Addie being kidnapped, and at the very end he rescues her, and that's the cliffhanger. And then the third book could be a couple months removed, where she has now been healing from her trauma and they're finally like getting that beautiful moments together. I don't know, I think it could have worked better that way. It sounds like I hated these books, and like that, I guess, is why I'm so conflicted on it, because again, entertainment value, like a 4-star, you know, like I binged Hunting Adeline in about 2 days. It was, you know, entertaining to me. I kept flipping the page, I want to know what happens next, but at the same time I have again just so many criticisms of it. I guess one other criticism I would have of Hunting Adeline is like both of these books are just honestly super long. Like, they're over 500 pages. Do they need to be over 500 pages? Not really. Like, there's a point in Hunting Adeline where I even think I filmed a clip of it. I was like, this is getting so repetitive. I'm bored. Like, why is, like, I understand Addie is going through trauma, but like, how many scenes do we need of her and Zaid arguing and Zaid trying to be with her and her pushing him away and all these things? Like, it's just like, we don't need to see it over and over and over again. We can edit the book down. It doesn't have to be that long, because there was a point where I was just like skimming. I was bored. I was skimming. I was like, let's get this over with. I just want to get to the end. So yeah, that is generally how I felt about the series. I'm sorry, I feel like this video is gonna be so long, but that is just because these books were so problematic. I could not just be like, oh my god, it was fun, I had a nice time. No, I had to give you like details of why I thought these books were problematic. Another thing I'll say about this book though is that H.G. Carlton like knows all the criticisms. Like, all the criticisms I have of book 1, she basically like talks about them in book 2. Like, Addie even says to Zaid, like, what makes it, what you did to me any different than what the society did to me, or you live by your own morals. Like, I don't know, like, she was like, how are you the person who saves these girls and yet you justify what you did to me, right? And Zaid never apologizes for what he did to her, but it's like H.G. Carlton knows like all the contradictions of the first book, because Addie is literally voicing them to Zaid in the second book, but I felt like there was no resolution to that. It's like, okay, I'm accusing you of these things, but you have absolutely no defense of it, and then we just like make up and we're together again and we never bring up these things again. You know, all these contradictions exist, but there's no explanation for any of them. I definitely would never recommend them to anybody, and I don't know if dark romance is my genre. So it was a fun experience. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I was honestly shocked when I read these books. I was like, this is what is so hyped up on TikTok. Like, it honestly made me a little scared of book talk. I was like, oh, okay, like this is what we're doing. No hate to anybody who enjoys these books, obviously. Like, I can understand the people who love these books. I understand their point of view. It's like, okay, like I don't condone any of these actions. Like, I was just super entertained and I like the story. Like, okay, I think that is fair. But also to the 1-star girlies, I resonate with you as well, because yes, I do think this series definitely romanticizes abuse. I would just never recommend these books to anybody. And if you do want to go into them, I highly suggest checking the trigger warnings and just be prepared to deal with a moral dilemma between being entertained and knowing how incredibly problematic these books are. So that is everything I have to say. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!